This is Matthew Cratter from Trade University, and today I want to talk about a big bad bank that's scared of Bitcoin. That bank is Santander UK, which is a British bank that is owned by the Spanish Santander Group. And what Santander UK did in the last couple of days is they imposed restrictions on their customers because they're scared of their customers taking too much money out and putting it into Bitcoin. This is the official announcement from their website. As they point out, investing in cryptocurrency assets can be high risk, blah, blah, blah. We want to do everything we can to protect our customers, and we feel that limiting payments to cryptocurrency exchanges is the best way to make sure that your money stays safe. So they're imposing movement limits. You can only move £1,000 per transaction and a total of £3,000 in any rolling 30-day period. So this is what Santander UK is doing, and it's hard to imagine the nerve of these bankers telling law-abiding citizens what they can and cannot do with their own money. And we're not talking about customers here who have a criminal history or a history of money laundering, etc., or drug dealing or something like that. These are just normal people who are having these restrictions imposed upon them and upon their own money. And of course, the bank is saying this is for your own good. This is how it's always framed, because we are the nanny bank and this is the nanny state. This is what the government and the banks always tell you when they do something bad to you. They always tell you that it's for your own good, just like an abusive parent. But if you want to know what's actually a really risky investment, I'll give you a hint. It's a business that's often levered 10 to 1 or more, that uses huge amounts of debt. And it's a type of business that blows up almost every decade due to making stupid loans at the worst possible time. If you guessed bank stocks, you are correct. For an example of this, we can look at Santander's parent company, which has been an absolutely terrible investment and terrible allocator of capital for the past 2 decades. So you have to ask yourself, who are they to tell anyone how to invest and what's risky and what's not? Imagine having your capital tied up in this piece of garbage for 20 years. This is a chart of Santander Group, and we can see this going all the way back to 2001, 2002. It's below levels it was trading at 20 years ago. Now it's basically a penny stock, and these are the people telling you that Bitcoin is too risky to invest in. If you're finding this video helpful so far, I just ask you to hit that like and subscribe button. For those of you who live in the UK, you probably know this already, but Santander has a really bad reputation, and they've done a lot of really bad things, which means even less they should be taking the moral high ground. Here's an example of Santander being fined for keeping dead customers' money. Here's an example of Santander being fined as well for money laundering. We're talking about fairly large fines here, £227 million. Here is an example from, I believe it was last year, when Santander accidentally paid out $175 million to customers. It was on Christmas Day, so it was a nice gift, but I assume these people had to return it. This just shows they can't even get their accounting right. They're an incompetent bank. Here's an example of them being fined in 2014 by the FCA for giving poor financial advice. This is probably the worst financial advice they've ever given. Though cryptocurrencies are a terrible investment, Bitcoin, of course, is different. So here's the company that's been fined for giving poor advice, trying to give advice. And when you look at the ratings, many people say that Santander is Britain's worst bank. This all goes back to Satoshi, and he pointed this out back in 2009. The root problem with conventional currency is all the trust that's required to make it work. And as part of this, in terms of Satoshi talks about how we have to trust our central banks not to debase the currency, and we also have to trust our commercial banks. They must be trusted to hold our money and transfer it electronically, but they lend it out in waves of credit bubbles with barely a fraction in reserve. And then, to add insult to injury, they tell us what we can do with our money that's in the bank. So this is why Bitcoin exists, and this is why Bitcoin is really the only solution, because it's not just another unregistered security issued by a different corporation. It's its own digital commodity. Now let's take a look at the bigger picture here, because it's easy to lose track of that as well. The financial situation of the UK, as we've seen over the past few weeks, is quite dire. And this is a country like the US that has a lot of debt that's going to need to try to inflate its way out of its debts. And along the way, it can take a number of steps. And one of those steps is trying to plug the exits. Now, in this case, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are an exit. Bitcoin obviously is the best exit and the only exit that I use. But historically, gold has been chosen as a way to hide from currency debasement, and this is why President Roosevelt back in 1933 had to confiscate all Americans' gold and stick it in Fort Knox and devalue the US dollar, because gold was an exit. So he first confiscated the gold and then he devalued the dollar. The other thing you can do besides blocking the exits is to force the people and the pensions to buy garbage government bonds, which we've talked about in other places. You try to stuff your government bonds in pensions and endowments, force corporations and insurance companies to hold them on their balance sheet. And then you boil the frog slowly. You keep government interest rates below the rates of inflation. We've also talked about this. The technical term for it is financial repression. And what this means is you have official policy that makes sure that interest rates are below the rate of inflation. And so you might be holding bonds that are government bonds that are yielding 4 or 5%, but then the inflation rate is 6, 7, 8%. And so you're losing purchasing power. And what you're basically doing is recapitalizing and bailing out the government without your permission and without you knowing it. Now, if you're hiding off in Bitcoin or gold, you can hide from this. Bitcoin is obviously a much better hedge now than gold is. So this is the big picture here. Santander perhaps trying to help to plug the exits from this failing fiat financial system. And if you can only take out, if you have a couple £100,000 and you can only take out 3,000 and move them into Bitcoin at any over any 30-day rolling period, this is going to be very, very difficult to escape the system, and you're going to end up getting boiled like anyone else. What we're going to see now, though, is the inevitable path from people saying that Bitcoin is a scam, or it's too expensive, the price is too high, or the price has fallen too low. You just can't seem to get the price right for non-Bitcoiners. But what's going to happen is this is going to move from Bitcoin is too expensive, or I don't like Bitcoin, to people saying something more like, I need Bitcoin and I'm willing to pay any price for it. For example, what's the correct price for a glass of water in a desert? It's basically priceless, and people will bid it up to whatever they need to. Are you going to wait? This is the question. Are you going to wait to buy Bitcoin until your bank, maybe Santander, though if you're banking with Santander, I would pull 100% of my assets out of there immediately, and I would tell them why I was doing it, because that is incredibly abusive thing to do, what the bank is doing. But the larger question, even if you're not banking at Santander, are you going to wait to buy Bitcoin until your bank, whatever country you're in, won't even allow you to buy $1 worth of it? So now is the time to understand where these things are heading, to piece together all these disparate news items and see what the big picture is. The big picture is financial repression. The big picture is a monetary reset to CBDCs. And the only place that you're going to be able to hide from this is Bitcoin. This movie is always the same. You have capital controls, you have confiscation, and then you have financial repression. You impose inflation on the population after you've tried to seal the exits the best that you can. And Bitcoin is going to make this process much more difficult for nation states this time around. It's not going to be just like confiscating the gold in all the bank vaults like in 1933. And even if your government knows that you own Bitcoin, they cannot take it from you except by force, except by going door to door. And they cannot go door to door if tens of millions of people own Bitcoin. So this is why it's very, very important to try to get Bitcoin out into the general population, because it makes all of us safer. It was very easy when they wanted to do financial repression in the 30s and 40s and 50s to confiscate the gold, because it was already mostly in bank vaults. If everyone is holding their own private keys, holding their own Bitcoin, this is going to be virtually impossible to do. So make sure, if you don't own any Bitcoin, this is not a financial recommendation, but I would personally say get your Bitcoin today before it is too late. And also make sure to withdraw it from the exchange. Hold it on a hardware wallet like a Trezor or a Cold Card. If you want more information on how to do that, I have 2 videos which I'll link to in the description notes below. The best ways to store small and medium amounts of Bitcoin, and then the best way to store large amounts of Bitcoin using Multi-Sig. So when you see these things happening, these are annoying, but make sure you know that the big picture is financial repression and governments doing whatever they can to suck the life energy out of their citizens in an attempt to recapitalize themselves. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. and let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.